Welcome everyone to this holiday special edition of our Native Strong weekly or bi-weekly town hall on the COVID-19 ongoing pandemic and the response, the vaccine situation, the variants, all of that being discussed today in the next hour with our special guest, as always, Dr. Lyle Ignace, and as well always as joining us.
Buju and we Maganaduk, not away Benazi, Indigenous cause the main do them Anishinaabe and Downey Open and Donjaba, Anishinaabe, all of it, all of those places they descend, all of those people. Welcome everybody, and apologies about being late, and thank you for joining us. This is I think one of our more important shows, especially for Milwaukee natives and folks coming into Milwaukee for a sobriety powwow tomorrow. But just a good wish from me and my family. We to all those good religious folks out there and believe in Santa Claus. There's my shirt. Don't stop believing. I wore that last week. I've been wearing it all week long in the spirit of things, not just kind of channeling my single bachelor self, but it was a lot of fun wearing it, lots of good compliments and people real nice and a great mood out there, but also a little worried. You know, that's why I'm wearing my hat in the fine native Great Lakes tradition. I have this beautiful finger woven top hat that's in Dr. Ignace's relatives. I got pictures of his relatives wearing top hats in Menominee country. So I thought, well, I'll wear mine for New Year's. That's me, baby New Year's, you guys. You know, wishing all you guys a happy New Year. And we are talking about Omicron and what is in our future. I will say my last piece in having and thanking you for being with us, be you watching us live or recorded, is that a part of this COVID-19 pandemic is a parallel challenge of mental health. And that is people that worry about their kids, elders worried about what's going to happen, what are the expectations, what can I do, and where can I go? And that's why we're here with Native Strong, and it's always a pleasure to be here. If you have any questions, please, you can write those into the little chat box. If you move your cursor around on your computer, there'll be a chat box there. Just click on that and you can type in your question and type it in right away. You know, you might forget your question, or if you have a question for someone else, ask that question and let that person know. Because if that question occurs to you, there's a lot of other people that know it. So we're going to go right into our program. And a lot of events. Do we stay home? Do we go out? If we go out, what is it exactly expected of us? And what can we do that's best for our families? So with that, turning this over to Dr. Ignace. Don't stop believing out there. Happy New Year to you. Just got to get that good wish in there. And Dr. Ignace, over to you. Welcome, everybody. And thanks for being with us.
Don't stop. That's from Journey, right?
Hey, Dr. Ignace, got to know the good music.
All right, welcome back. So we are just days away from a new year, turning the leaf here, turning the page. And I wish I had good news in trying and celebrating New Year's for everyone. But we're still in the same boat we were a year ago. And what I want to do is kind of highlight a lot of the major milestones that have occurred over the last, well, since the pandemic started. And this is really much just a review of things, and just so people remember all of the things that have been going on. So back in the turn of 2019, there were rumblings of a virus that was coming out of China. They didn't have a nomenclature for it yet, but there was a virus of concern in China, and reports of individuals falling ill quite quickly, and there being passings, fatalities due to this, and this really led to the WHO being involved. Countries started to become more and more involved of this virus, and the United States put out a public health emergency notice in February of 2020. And their, first cases started to show up here in the United States. And on March 15th, we had school closures. It went pretty much across the entire United States. We started to see cases in the state of Washington, California, and we started seeing cases here in Wisconsin. And this really led to a rapid concern of public health for everyone. And I remember having an emergency Milwaukee County meeting regarding what was Milwaukee's response going to be. And I thought this to be a pretty interesting time, because the concern was, we all had a concern about the virus, but we didn't know how extensive or how rapid the rate of infection was going to be. And I remember this on March 12th. I came back from that meeting, and I essentially told all of my staff to be ready for this emergency declaration. Because what I was hearing was definitely an indication that shutdowns were coming. Stay-at-home orders were initiated the following week, and we had all these restrictions, not just here in Milwaukee, but throughout the entire United States. Some restrictions had eased as time and summer came. We've had these fluctuations, and then we heard of variants occurring in alpha and beta. Mask mandates were initiated, and 18 months ago, we had kind of a lull point in the rate of infection. Then this fall came, and then we had the huge tsunami of infections that occurred. And this was before the vaccines were even created. I mean, they were well past their research and development, past their clinical phase trials. FDA, CDC approved their emergency use, and by the end of December, mid-December, vaccines were being distributed throughout the country. Federal agencies, IHS was one of those federal agencies. And on December 14th, in the state of Wisconsin, I had gone on Facebook Live to receive one of the first vaccines, Pfizer vaccines, here in the state of Wisconsin. That went a bit viral for us, and ever since December 14th, it's really been off to the races. We have been involved in all types of eligibility questions around who gets vaccines first, healthcare providers, age groups, and we took a very kind of a progressive approach at our facility, where we got the first batch, but then we started to address healthcare workers, frontline workers, essential workers, And then we went straight into the 65 and older Native population. And we were really aggressive in our approach, getting as many individuals who wanted to be vaccinated. We created 2 huge campaigns, vaccine campaigns in March and April, and vaccinated close to over 2,500 individuals, the vast majority of those being Native. And so as time went by, the rate of infections started going down. And you can see by these color-coded landmarks of, these were kind of those progressive stages of eligibility. And the more and more people who became eligible, you can kind of see how effective the vaccines were. So individuals who got the vaccine obviously showed a great deal, a great level of protection. And things were looking on the upside, especially going into the summer months. And right around July, we were hearing worldwide discussion about another variant being transmitted, and that was the Delta variant. And India obviously had a huge transmission of Delta. And as soon as India had started their transmission, we saw a huge transmission of new infections in the UK. And we followed suit after that and have been managing Delta for quite some time. And so it certainly appears to be a continued roller coaster of COVID, its various variants that have popped up. And just when we thought we were on kind of this trending downwards of Delta, we now have a new emerging variant called Omicron. And the world became aware of Omicron out of South Africa about a week before Thanksgiving. And so South Africa was dealing with a new variant, and the rate of infections and the rate of transmission went up dramatically. And so what was occurring in South Africa soon started occurring in the UK. And it wasn't really until after Thanksgiving, like a week or two, about 2 weeks after, we started seeing cases of Omicron here in the United States. And it wasn't that long ago where we'd hear maybe one case, San Francisco, Minneapolis, New York, we had here in Milwaukee, state of Washington, and then, that was just, it seemed like yesterday, where there were just these modest number of cases being popped up, and then we started hearing about outbreaks and huge spikes of new cases. And so we're now at a point where I think the last time I reported to you, there were 36 states, 2 weeks ago, 36 states that had Omicron. Now it's all 50, and all of its U.S. territories and commonwealths. It's everywhere now. I don't think there's any place in the world that is spared of Omicron. And so as this new variant has progressed, what we see here on the table on the right-hand side, we have kind of a color coding of all of the variants. And as you can see, South Africa, its predominant strain right now is Omicron, about 96%, with the remaining being of other types, other variants. But Delta and Gray, as you can see, is starting to recede. So what's occurring in South Africa, they essentially had a month, kind of a month head start before anybody. And so as you go down country by country, you can see the countries of Omicron as this red wave overcoming each country. And this was, as of a couple days ago, I'll give you some slight up to date, but you can see every country is now being affected by Omicron. And here in the United States, 41%. Now this is as of December 27th, 41% with Omicron, and 60% of remaining cases being Delta still. So you can see between where South Africa is now to where we are, we're pretty much following in line of how South Africa progressed in its COVID cases. And this shouldn't be any surprise. In fact, it doesn't surprise me that we're following suit. And I like to use the UK as kind of the guiding post here, because what's going to happen, what's going to occur in the UK is essentially what's going to happen here in the United States. We have similar patterns of demographics, age groups, even when it comes to vaccination rates. They're slightly above what the United States is. But again, if we're looking at trying to compare apples to apples, the UK is probably the best example of another country that's closely represents the United States, and what has occurred there has essentially occurred here in the United States. They're just slightly ahead of us. So as of yesterday, the UK has confirmed 180,000 cases. However, they're actually estimating over 200,000 cases, and with nearly 2 million people currently that are infected with COVID, and predominantly Omicron. Now, the reason why the confirmed cases are different from the estimated, and we're seeing this right now, is with the emergence of home testing kits, that people are becoming ill with cold-like symptoms, getting over-the-counter tests, getting positive, but not necessarily reporting their results to any public lab or public health department. So what we're seeing are kind of two parts. The ones we know are confirmed are the ones that officially go and get tested. These are usually the PCR testing. These go to the state labs. The state confirms or shows a negative test result. Those are the numbers that actually officially get recorded. When we do positives, we get positives, but we don't notify any health authority. So these are positive cases, but unconfirmed, and so we have an estimation of a greater amount. Now, still, what's occurring is there is still a great amount of asymptomatic individuals who are positive for COVID. This is happening, and its transmission is quite significant. One of the things that the UK is noticing right now, with the greater proportion of new cases, they are seeing a modest increase in hospitalizations. Now, some may say, well, an increase in cases and hospitalization is not good. Well, given that the proportion of new cases to, if we compare that rate of hospitalization to, let's say, Delta, people who got Delta and the rate that was occurring then, if we were to transplant what occurred with Delta and what occurred with Omicron right now, we actually would see even a higher increase if it was that severe of an infection. So the fact that there's only a modest increase is actually a good indication that the severity of illness leading to hospitalization is actually lower. It's lower than Delta and lower than the other variants that have been going around. So that's actually a good thing. What's also occurring in the UK is the mechanical ventilation, intubation of individuals with severe disease. The trend right now is actually going down. So even though there may be more hospitalizations, which certainly would indicate severe disease, it's not leading to higher ICU, and it's not leading to higher lung disease leading to ventilation. And what in the last 7 days, the UK has noticed a 34% reduction in fatalities. So this is actually a good thing that's occurring, because as I mentioned, 34% reduction. The rate of Omicron occurring in England is overall 93%. So this is as of today. England is saying that 93% of all new infections are due to Omicron. In London, 96%, which would mean Delta is now representing a smaller and smaller portion. We know that Delta infections with Delta, especially in an unvaccinated population, can be quite severe, especially if it lands you in the hospital. So the fact that fatalities are going down, Delta is being wiped out, Omicron is now the dominant. These are a good thing. So as kind of leading metrics here moving forward, I mean, it's nice to know how many infections are occurring, but I think what are probably the most important are how many hospitalizations are occurring, how many people are in the ICU, and what's the fatality rate. Those are probably the biggest leading metrics you want to know as to how serious this is. Yes, COVID is serious, but I think what we're seeing out of the UK is the level of severity is going down. Rate of getting infected is high, but the severity of this is lower. ICU admissions are lower. The fatality rates are lower. The risk of intubation is trending downwards. So these are all good signs. And what's being seen also is the rate of turnaround of individuals. People who show or demonstrate signs of COVID. The average day now is actually a 3-day hospitalization stay, and people are being discharged. So as fast as hospitalizations have modestly increased, the turnaround for individuals is actually quite quick. So there is definitely a very rapid incline of infection transmission, getting sick. Is it going to be the mild and peak or moderate peak or severe leading to hospitalization several days and then turn around and get better? And what I don't know out of the UK is who are these individuals that are being admitted, because it's kind of across the board, whether you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, or vaccinated with natural immunity. It's kind of across the board. Although the unvaccinated tend to make up close to 50% of all of the admissions. So that's what's going on in the UK. And what's occurring in South Africa, hospitalizations are going down. The estimation right now is in South Africa is that it has peaked in Omicron infections and it's actually trending downwards. So that is also a good indication that this may be a short-lived spike. Now, one of the frontline providers has come out and talked several times about what they are seeing as frontline providers in South Africa. And I took this statement from this interview because I thought it to be quite interesting. So what they're saying, well, people will tell them that they went to bed the night before, they felt warm, maybe had some chill during the night, but when they woke up, they generally noted these symptoms: a headache, body ache. What was kind of interesting was a bone pain and fatigue. These were the leading symptoms of what they would see or what patients would tell them that would lead them to go seek help, a healthcare provider visit. Those were kind of the leading symptoms. It's not necessarily having a sore throat, not necessarily having upper respiratory symptoms. It is kind of these very kind of not abnormal, but kind of these benign symptoms that would, at least to the frontline people in South Africa, to lead them to believe these are the symptoms, the telltale symptoms of what is bound to come is a positive test for COVID. So these are now the other symptoms like the nasal congestion, the sneezing. Maybe you do get a throat, maybe you have a cough. That kind of comes later. But the first early indications, first early signs are headache, body aches, bone pain, and fatigue. Those were the primarily initial leading symptoms that people would mention. Now, what's occurring here in the United States, this number right in the middle, cases in the last 7 days, over 2.2 million cases. And that was as of today at 154, 2.2 million cases. Those are the confirmed cases. These are not the, this does not include the estimated. This does not include the PCR, the rapid test that people have at home. You could pretty much assume that I would add at least 1 million more cases onto this, to the number of cases in the last 7 days. So we are probably more like looking at 3 million plus cases currently. So that is a bit scary because I had not seen that number of positive cases, seen that positive. Even with Delta, it had not occurred. Even with Beta, it had not occurred. Not to the extent of these numbers in such a short amount of time. So what has occurred in South Africa with that early spike, what's occurred in the UK with their spike. So South Africa was first about 4 or 5 weeks ago. UK followed about 2 or 3 weeks after that. We are not far behind the UK, and I would say we are probably at the beginning of that spike here in the United States. The numbers are going up, and they're going up dramatically, and they'll continue to go up dramatically. I was in the clinic today seeing patients, and employees are turning positive. My clients are turning positive, and it's not overwhelming, cold symptoms that I'm seeing. Much of what I mentioned in South Africa's frontline providers are seeing, they feel kind of achy. I kind of have a scratch in my throat and maybe feel a little congested, nothing significant. And, they've went to go get a rapid test, and sure enough, they've turned positive. So it is rather a benign presentation that doesn't really seem all that dramatic, or would even lead them to think that they have COVID. But as soon as they get that test, it turns positive, and they know exactly what they have. And so that a lot of that is going on right now. And what I find kind of interesting, the CDC has now come out with new guidelines right on the cusp of Omicron. And as I mentioned, because the number of new cases are going to be so dramatic, obviously this is going to have an impact not just on families, but also family members who work. So could this impact the workforce of the United States? And the answer is yes. So these are the latest guidelines to isolating and quarantining for testing positive for COVID. Now, isolation, of course, comes, is no surprise to anybody, but here are the differences between symptomatic COVID and asymptomatic COVID. And there is quite a distinction between that. We do know that people can turn positive and not have symptoms. And these individuals are certainly have the potential of transmitting Omicron. So isolation for asymptomatic people with COVID-19, 5 days isolation, followed by 5 days of wearing masks when around others. This is for asymptomatic. Isolation for symptomatic individuals, 10 days isolation if symptomatic and symptoms have improved. So that hasn't changed for symptomatic individuals. That typically has been the course of the infection. People get symptoms, get tested, turn positive. So it's really when symptoms started where the clock starts for 10 days. So now here's kind of a wrinkle in things. If you were exposed to an individual that has COVID-19, the general census coming out of CDC is that people quarantine for unvaccinated individuals or those who are fully vaccinated more than 6 months ago and not boosted. So I added this because this is about 90% of the United States that would make up this category or this group of people. We have a good portion of people that are still unvaccinated. We have an even greater proportion of individuals who are fully vaccinated but haven't gotten their boosters. And that makes up a lot of people. So quarantine for 5 days, followed by strict mask use for additional 5 days. So I find this a little interesting because not all necessarily exposures. Now, remember, an exposure is by definition anything in a closed space for 5 minutes unmasked. Now, I would say 99.9% of what we did last weekend for Christmas essentially was no mask and close contact with family members for a prolonged period of time. We met family, we met friends, we were in spaces. So there wasn't any time where I'd say the vast majority of individuals in the United States that weren't exposed, you know. And what we're finding out now, Christmas on Saturday, people are now reporting symptoms on this past Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're getting a lot more. Our request for testing has gone through the roof. So those are the latest guidelines on the cusp of Omicron for asymptomatic individuals or symptomatic, and what to do if you are exposed. So for those individuals that have been vaccinated and boosted, no quarantine is necessarily following an exposure. So those are the latest guidelines right now on what people should do. I have a feeling this is going to be a little confusing for folks, because it takes you a moment to, you know, identify where you belong in these groupings. So do take a moment when you get a chance to look this up, because it may impact you sooner than later, especially as we go into the New Year's weekend. What's occurring here in the United States, here we have two lines, one purple, one orange. Orange is representative of Omicron. I'm sorry, purple represents Omicron, orange represents Delta. And this was as of yesterday. Omicron now represents 58.6% of all new cases. Delta is 41.1%. So you can see how even just over 3 or 4 days, the Omicron at, I think in the United States on the 27th was 41%. Now those numbers have flipped. Now the thing is, as we go into this weekend, we still have Delta. Delta is still around. But we're also seeing a lot more transmission of Omicron. So this does not surprise me how this is unfolding. And to tell you the truth, this is what I would have hoped we would see. That we would see any new infections be the result of Omicron and not Delta. Given the number of infections, I would rather see Omicron as being the virus as opposed to the Delta version. Now, I talked about symptoms. I talked about 2 weeks ago. Again, there's this whole spectrum of symptoms, minimal to no symptoms. People who have cold-like symptoms that start off as headaches, body aches, maybe a sore throat to some degree. Onset to duration of symptoms is usually about a day or two. People tend not to lose taste or smell. Flu-like symptoms. People can progress to flu-like symptoms. That's kind of that next escalation of tier of symptoms. Headaches, myalgias, nasal congestion, cough, and then of course the full-on of COVID, of flu-like symptoms, lost the taste of smell, short of breath, cough, and fever. Now, there are some kind of new twists that have come in, and they tend to be GI. GI being nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite. Now, it's not that these are new symptoms. These have always have occurred with COVID. It's just that we never really talked about them because they were kind of lower on the end of major symptoms. Now we're starting to see more GI symptoms with the Omicron version. Now, is that necessarily going to tell you if it's Delta or Omicron? It may be at least an indication. So that's, again, there's twists to the symptoms, but I'm kind of giving you the main symptoms that you would see and be concerned about the most. And what's confusing right now is because we are in cold and flu season. We are starting to see influenza A, RSV start showing up in adults and kids. So, but having flu-like symptoms certainly feels bad. I've had the flu. It's not fun. And I'm sure those flu-like symptoms would certainly be very similar to having COVID. So we're seeing people with symptoms test negative for COVID, but turn positive for influenza A, and that's going to put another little twist in how we diagnose people in the next month or two. What's occurring in the United States, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, most of the cases were being seen in the Northeast and the Great Lakes states. Now things have shifted. The predominant states now are New York, Illinois, Florida, California, Texas. And you can see here on the left-hand side, the number of new cases in the last 7 days. Each one of these states has just skyrocketed. And I would look at each one of these states. If we were to say, if we got a little more granular in the details here in numbers, I would say that if you looked at UK, compared that to UK to these states, I would say it's pretty similar. So what's occurring in these states I circled is essentially what's occurring in the UK. If you're planning to go to Puerto Rico, I would really put hesitation on that. Normally, Puerto Rico almost has 50,000 cases this past week. They're typically less than 1,000, 2,000 a week. Their numbers have skyrocketed right now. So a lot of cases going on right now. So new admissions with the skyrocketing number of cases occurring. Yeah, there are a slight bump in the number of admissions. But are we going to follow the UK? Could this lead to short hospital stays, less ICU, less mechanical ventilation? That is certainly hopeful that that would be the case. Only 58.1% of the states of Wisconsin are totally vaccinated. This is the United States. 62% of the population is vaccinated. If you look at boosters, our elderly population, 65 and older, are well on their way to almost 60% of the population being vaccinated there. The native populations across the 3 states over the last 2 weeks has essentially plateaued. Now, this is on the cusp of COVID, of Delta. Omicron is now not just a urban virus, it is now going well into the rural areas, and we may see another bump in the number of new cases on reservations in these 3 states. So it's, I would say, maybe a little too early to indicate if this is going to miss the reservations, but my sense is another week or two, then these numbers will change. Here in Wisconsin, yesterday, 7,772 confirmed cases of COVID. We compare that to even a year ago, back in November 17, 2020, the peak at that time, 7,870 cases. So one more day, I wouldn't doubt if we're going to surpass 8,000 as of today's testing. We're now averaging 4,230 cases on the average, and that's going to change with today's results. So again, we are right at the beginning of the spike, and I suspect this spike continuing to go up for the next 2-3 weeks. It may be 2 or 3 weeks before we see it peak and starting to decline. This hasn't changed here in Milwaukee. So the fatality rate for natives in Milwaukee County has not changed. It's been 0 in the last 90 days and counting. Vaccination rates of the native population in Milwaukee is the highest than any other race or ethnicity group here in Milwaukee. I wanted to highlight this to the far right. The African American community has the lowest rate, and I'll explain why here in a few slides. So here is the latest of cases in the state of Wisconsin. This is the case rate by race and ethnicity of all ages, okay? And look at the bottom graph. You see numbers kind of plateau, but then you see one teal color spike straight up. This is the African American case rate in the state of Wisconsin. And you can see over the last week, it has just taken a huge leap in numbers. This is all ages, case rates by race in the state of Wisconsin. Population-based hospitalizations haven't significantly changed and still has remained steady. Hospitalizations, natives are have the second highest rate in the state of Wisconsin. If we look a little more closely at the case rates, okay, for age group 25 to 34 and 35 to 44, we see two distinctive markers here that really are an outlier. You know, beyond just the group being here, this is a definite indication that COVID is accelerating in the African American communities. And this is by age group. So age groups 25 to 34, 35 to 44, clearly a very distinctive change of what's occurring in these communities. Fatalities have not changed in terms of race and ethnicity. Natives still have the highest fatality rate in the state of Wisconsin. And the last slide here showing basically where are the new cases, what age groups. We look at the top half, upper right-hand side, we see the age groups of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds making up the vast majority of new cases, okay? New cases do not necessarily equate to hospitalizations. And so as we see in terms of cases going on, we still see that the older population are much more at risk for hospitalization. And when we look at ICU admissions, again, the youth is certainly protective, and we see much higher rates in the older population, and again, in the fatality rates as being clear indicators of of individuals that are 65 and older at the most highest risk of fatality. So while the boosters for our elders are definitely helpful, the rates of infection are much lower than other age groups. The younger population, 20s and 30s, are now the number 1 and number 2. And you can see the line, the direction of the line is the indicator of where the trends are going in those particular metrics. So just a reminder, tomorrow from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., GLIC, along with Indian Community School, Milwaukee Indian Education, the American Indian Chamber of Commerce have sponsored a sobriety powwow, which will be hosted by our friend here, and Mark Denning, who will be emceeing it. And we have a really nice lineup for people who want to attend. Now, we do ask that people bring proof of vaccination and or a negative test results that you've gotten within 72 hours. So, so please, given what's going on now, be mindful of others. If you plan on attending, please bring your proof of vaccination or a negative test, and we will be happy to celebrate the new year with you. So, Mark, Jeremiah, I'll turn this back over to you guys.
Dr. Ignace, thanks again for getting to some really good information for our community and looking at Native specific numbers, much appreciated. To get to some questions right away, those of you that are hanging in there, both live and watching this before they head out for tomorrow night's activity, these are specific to the activity. So one of the questions from one of our veterans in our veterans lineup, he's an older Vietnam era guy, little nervous about coming out. He's got some health issues related to his lungs. We got a smoker, you know, not obese though, in okay shape, but still concerned. He wants to be there. He wants to be a part of it. I reminded him that, hey, you know, there's a fire, I believe, that's going to be there outside. The event itself is spread out over 2 larger rooms. And there's a pretty good HVAC system because it's a school, a newer school. So we got a lot of pluses going. Yep. His concern is, what can I do for myself, right? It's not about other people. He's like, what can I do for me? And it was around masks. So I just happen to have a couple examples he showed me. So I'm going to show you, and maybe you can kind of walk through mask choice. Should people go out, be it the sobriety powwow tomorrow or something else? So we got cloth. We'll have these. We got the store-bought, which is more of a rayon sort of material, not cotton. We have these that are available at stores and so on. People just grab those. I don't know how safe they are. You can kind of see light through them. I don't know if that makes a difference. Someone said yes, someone said no. To note to yourself. He also said he had a KN95 mask available to him. So I just happened to have one of those that a first responder gave to me at an event. I went to, and I have one of these sports masks from a major company, Nike and Under Armour, and don't want to, you know, Adidas, all kinds of different companies have these, but they're made more for sports. So kind of, that's what's out there. I'm sure there's other masks. So, you know, not giving advice specifically to him, but those that are watching, kind of all of these mask choices. Well, I want to go out tonight. I'd like to be with family at an event. What should they be doing? Are we double masking, triple masking? Are we of those choices? So that's over to you, and a couple more questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to reiterate what you mentioned about the powwow and the level of comfort that I have right now. I was reassured. I did talk to the headmaster there, and what was reassuring to me was the HVAC system that they have there at the facility. It will be in their big auditorium at ICS. And the air can actually be circulated 7 times within the hour, which basically means whatever, that is really good. So the risk of transmission, I feel, dramatically goes down with that level of turnaround in air 7 times. We are looking at individuals to wear a mask during the event. Obviously, eating or even people who sing. So we want to make this as safe for everyone as possible. And this individual who would like to attend, I would recommend the KN95 mask. That's a little more form-fitting and snug, and it may be a little more labor intense and trying to normally breathe through that. You can breathe through that. It may be harder to talk through it, but breathing is not a problem. So that KN95 is your best bet. We all don't have hazmat suits, so that's out. The second thing that I think you brought up was one of the more common face masks, that the white one that looks a little thinner. Yeah, I mean, if anything, yeah, that's fine. We will be providing, Glick will be providing face masks for the event for both kids and adults. That's what we use here on a regular basis. So those would be my 2 preferences, that if you're going to wear a mask, wear those 2 types. The sports one, I know Nike, Under Armour provide theirs, and those are okay. I mean, those are okay. Cloth mask, the other, neck gaiter stuff, I really wouldn't wear those. They look cool, they have cool designs, and you can look all scary sometimes, but they really don't provide any protection in terms of filtering any particles.
The second question is a follow-up to that one, was about hand washing. Is there any sort of, that seems to have gone by the wayside, but do you have any updates or information for this individual? Again, another question, his last question. Are we washing dead hands with that, with this stuff? I think I still have 1 bottle left of all the events I've been to. Are we still washing? Have we put that to the side? What's your recommendation at this event when it comes to this kind of thing?
Yeah, the hand washing, hand protection, these things don't change. These are the most basic of basic preventative of transmission, not just of COVID, but really of any type of virus or even bacteria. Washing your hands is one of the best protective measures that you can do. As I mentioned during this presentation, that we're starting to see colds. It is cold and flu season. We are starting to see colds. If it's not COVID, it's typically a cold. If it's not a cold, it could be influenza A, the flu, or it could be bacterial sinus issues, or bronchitis. So typically, as we mentioned, these are really basic standard precautions that everyone should take. Wash their hands or use the hand sanitizer as often as you can. Not only will it help reduce the transmission and carrying of bugs and germs, but again, it is really about protecting yourself. We all touch our eyes, nose, and our mouth on a regular basis, and so just keeping your hands clean, hand sanitizer, will certainly go a long way.
So I'd like to turn this over to Jeremiah. Certainly working at the health center, you may have some frontline concerns that you've heard, common questions, and I have just a couple short ones when you're done, and then something to say. So Jeremiah, we'll get you set up there. with a couple questions. The aside that I wanted to go to, and I'll just speak to that now, is we are talking to Native people, and these words are for our traditional folks. We also, and I wanted to acknowledge this, went through a very important time of our solstice on December 21st, and just not lots of people talk about that, but we need to, because let's say if you're at home, you're watching this, you're concerned about your relatives, you're concerned all about the stuff that's happening out there. That solstice is just so vitally important, especially in our Great Lakes area, because that means and signals not just about the shortest day, but it's also a time of reflection, meaning we're thinking about ourselves. We're not thinking about that other person out there. We're not doing those other things. And I ran into an elder who was reflecting on the solstice, and I shared with them an older person, even older than the one I was talking to, in their 90s. And they said that there was so much in life that they had experienced, and so many of their friends had passed. And in this time of reflection, the idea of making amends, the idea of concentrating on bettering his mental health, right, was really interesting. And so we talked about it, but I said, don't forget about that teaching, that we need to reflect on ourselves. And when it comes to forgiveness, that begins with us. So that begins with you. And that means when you're looking around and the people that need your forgiveness, or maybe need to hear those words, and they're not around, you have yourself. And that journey of forgiveness begins inside of you. So even though they may not be around, those difficult things that happen through the year, and you're beginning that new fire, right? As we talk about that spark that starts the new fire of that new year. And that spark radiates of love and acceptance and selfhood, that radiates outside of your lodge, your vessel, and it invites everybody else back in. And that fire, we especially need to feed that at this time of year with thoughts of reflection, with that beginning of things anew, casting out the stuff that causes us concerns. It really does have to start within ourselves. And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about this new year myself, that's begun not that long ago, because there's so much work that we can do on us, and we get to concentrate on that now, this quiet time that we take for you. So if you're not in a place that you can come to this event, certainly that is something you can do, that is cultural, that is beautiful, because that spark that shines within you shines outside of your lodge and is inviting to others as that grows in its strength. So I just wanted to add that for those that are finding, hey man, I can't go to the POW, but there's something I want to do that's sober, that's constructive, that is cultural, and that's an activity you can do with yourself or with somebody else, and take that real time of serious reflection and positivity. So I just wanted to bring that cultural message out. This is native to native conversation. There's also a mental health component to all of this worry that's out there. And if you do come and celebrate with us, please be doing it safely. I'll be there and be reminding people over the mic to please mask. Dancers and singers, we get it. And for me, I'll be wearing mine when I can, because I want to protect them. We got to have them keep doing what they're doing too, because we're all a part of that circle out there. So that's the end of my short little, my Dr. Denning talk, that part of the world that I know about. And Jeremiah, I gave you a little moment there, and maybe there's a couple questions you can add that you're hearing and might help people out there in the midst of this Omicron concern. Jeremiah?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Actually, I had a question, and I think Linda or somebody may have brought it up in the chat bubble here about testing, within 72 hours for the powwow. And, over this holiday weekend and Christmas Eve, and I experienced it myself, that, the at-home rapid tests kind of just flying off the shelf. So people are using them. Will that, or how would that be admissible as a form of admission with a negative COVID test, or would you prefer or recommend an actual COVID test from a either your provider or another location?
You know, it's going to be hard because the rapid tests that you get over the counter don't have a printout. There's no date stamp saying when you did it, and it's going to be difficult unless you know of a location that does offer rapid tests that do a printout. The only place that I know that does it, and that's mainly out of my own experience, is our clinic here in Milwaukee. Our clinic is closed tomorrow. We are open till 7. So if there is a need and desire to come to the powwow tomorrow, I suggest that you give us a call right now. 414-383-9526 and schedule that COVID test for tomorrow, today. Otherwise, it may be a little harder, more difficult to get you in.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nace. I also had a question regarding, and this is very different avenue direction. We've now been in this pandemic for, going on 2 years almost. And have you seen anything or read anything on the impact of, a pregnant mother having COVID-19 and, an impact on that unborn child? I guess depending on, I'm sure there's, depends on, how old that child or unborn baby would be, or, term stuff like that. But just curious if you've read anything on that subject or heard anything about that.
So I guess kind of two things. Mom with baby, there's kind of a couple things. One, there's no indication or signs that getting vaccinated, mom being vaccinated, has led to any adverse effects on the unborn. We're probably new babies anywhere from 9 months to 12 months, 12 years, 12 months of age, maybe the birth of mom being or having COVID. There hasn't been any reported that I'm aware of any effects, delirious effects to the unborn as a result of mom either being unvaccinated with or having had COVID. We do know that moms that are unvaccinated who do get COVID are at much higher risk of fatality to themselves and baby, as well as hospitalization, intubation, early preterm labor, and even miscarriage. So a couple things there. There has not been any reported adverse outcomes as a result of mom having COVID while pregnant, or mom being vaccinated to their infants after delivery.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nace. Appreciate that. And I just had one more, and I know you brought up the kind of declining or maybe leveling off of hospital admissions and ICU admissions for the UK, and kind of looking at that as like a harbinger of like what may happen here in the US. It does seem recently that in the US we have seen an increase in hospitalizations for children I haven't, I think I've tried to break down the data myself as far as ages, and I think you have that slide as well. But where do you see that heading? I guess in the UK, or have you seen that specifically in the UK? Has that transferred over to the children being vaccinated, or sorry, not vaccinated, hospitalized at a lesser rate as well, or just to kind of give us an idea of what that could look like for our kids here?
Yeah, so I think, some of the early reports that I've seen and read are the unvaccinated. So the 0 to 5-year-olds who are unvaccinated, that may the number of hospitalizations is low to begin with, but of those who are being hospitalized, a good 60% of them are less than the age of 5. And these are the unvaccinated individuals. So that's happening. But even the 0 to 5 who get admitted, these are individuals that aren't being rushed to the ICU or being intubated, and certainly they are sick enough to be in the hospital, but it's not. I don't know if anybody is familiar or had experienced this with their newborn, but RSV in infants is pretty serious, and it's kind of scary when you have a child who has RSV to a respiratory infection that can lead to difficulties breathing. My sense is that it probably looks like resembles like RSV, if you've ever seen that in your infant. So it is a little bit more than just having a runny nose and a cough. There's some labored breathing that comes with it, but it doesn't lead to worse outcomes. It may lead to a hospitalization, but the vast majority of 0 to 5 babies and kids who do get admitted with treatment do have a good turnaround and do actually quite fine. So it's 0 to 5, the unvaccinated group that is being seen as being the higher proportion of admissions for kids. And most of the time, even individuals over the age of 5 that get admitted again, it's serious enough, but not to be admitted, but not to the ICU, not to be intubated. And their turnarounds are usually, and outcomes are very, very good. So that's what I'm hearing. That's the unvaccinated population, is that 0 to 5 that will be at risk for this variant, and the potential is there to be admitted, but I don't believe it's any higher rate than it has been this whole time with COVID.
All right, Dr. Ignace. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No,
Jeremiah, sorry.
was just gonna pass it back to you, Mark. Thanks.
My last question, and thanks for going overtime. I know that we meet every 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
When this all started, we were meeting every week. But so this is my last question, and you can have the last comment. This came from a business owner, and it kind of alluding to what you referred to before, having staffing issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think the business, I'm not sure, is like 12 to 25 full and part-time altogether. And he has this ability to shut down, but not for long, without affecting a huge part of the bottom line. But it hurts because his folks are hourly. So here's the question, to belabor it. As he's planning, preparing, looking at each week, he's needing to staff these things.
Yeah.
You did talk about your estimation of how long this is going to last.
Mm-hmm.
Or because he's looking at, well, maybe you should go to part-time instead of having full-time people. Kind of, if it's going to be a long time, he's better off. His thought was part-time, then he can have people fill in a call-in basis rather than full-time, which means he's going to be losing them. If he loses them, does he lose them once to Omicron? Is he going to lose them over and over again.
Mhm.
Inside of that are a couple directions for you to go, and that'll be my last question: is are we going to be shutting down? Is it wiser to that? Is it right? Is there going to be a steep drop off at some point?
Yeah.
Kind of, I'll leave that there and let you kind of suss that one out. But I didn't want to forget that question from our small business person. All right.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. And as an employer myself of a health center, this is obviously going to impact even my my employees as well. So believe me, this is the one thing that keeps me up at night, is assuring how I'm going to be staffing, what's this next week coming, and what are our backups to our backup plans, because perfect storm is going to be happening again, especially when it comes to filling spots and making sure that I have employees to provide services. But these guidelines to, as I mentioned, that the CDC put out actually may kind of curb the impact of your employees being not only being exposed, but also what does it mean to be positive. And there's going to be individuals that will get it. There will be individuals that will be symptomatic, and there will be individuals that are asymptomatic. I think if you follow this 5-day, 10-day rule, people may be able to get back to work quicker, especially if they come up positive, but they're asymptomatic. So there's going to be, it's going to impact us. I already see it impacting my staff right now. The lucky thing for us is that we're heading into a long weekend of New Year's Eve weekend. And hopefully by Monday and Tuesday, I can start getting my staff. But then again, I'm at risk for the weekend and more infections and more infections and more infections. And so my sense and my thoughts and recommendations would to definitely straddle, and you're going to have to be really creative on this one. Assuring that you can not only fill what you can with the staff that you have, but if that means cutting hours down, then that may be the best option you have and for the next 2 weeks, because it's coming. Without a doubt, Omicron is coming, and it's just how well can people protect themselves in the short term here until this second tsunami passes. And I suspect it will be another 2 weeks before we get to that other side and the downside. So it will be a 2-week stretch here of really being creative and innovative, and not only maintaining, keeping your doors open, but at least, and at the same time assuring that your employees wear those masks for right now. So with that, believe it or not, the arrival of Omicron is not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, the number of cases are going to dramatically go up. The number of asymptomatic, mildly asymptomatic, even cold-like symptoms is going to be the vast majority. There may be a slight bump in the number of hospitalizations, but that rate of hospitalizations now compared to where we were with Delta is actually going to be lower. And the severity of COVID, of Omicron, appears to be panning out that it is less severe, less hospitalizations, and even less fatalities. This is the scenario if you're looking at an escape hatch from this. Omicron would be that type of a virus that we would want, as opposed to all the other variants that have come through, especially Delta as well. And it's going to be a hard 2 weeks. It will be a difficult. There are going to be families, one individual, and there'll be entire family households that will turn positive. And that's going to be the hard part, because it's going to be a 5 to 7 day quarantine until everyone recovers and can return back. So just think of the spike in cases right now, the number of people, the number of households, the number of days it will take for people to recover. Like I said, the peak of cases will be in 2 weeks and maybe 3 to 4 weeks before we see a more returning back to normal. And that may be at the end of January. But I'm hopeful and just like Mark was saying about this year's solstice on the 21st and a time of reflection. This is, I would say, this is a time of hope that there's going to be some more hardship coming, but there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And I see that much clearer now than I have over the last 2 years. And so with this New Year's weekend, New Year's Eve weekend leading into 2022, I am hopeful that next year is definitely going to be a better time for everyone. So until 2 weeks from now, until next time, everyone stay strong, stay protected, and everyone please hold that candle to hope that this is the beginning of the new normal that we can get through, even though it may be a little difficult in the short term. So everyone take care, be safe, and I will see everyone next year. Take care.